All right, I don't remember when we were sinking and going into a free fall correction here, and some feared worse, that the president was ever talking about it, or whether it was good or bad. But this is the first time, speaking before a CPAC conservative audience in Washington, that at least he mentioned it in a kidding way, and to say that the trend was still his friend. The read on all of this from Rich Karlgaard and John Layfield. John, the president kind of saying, you know, I wish it would go down a little bit. He didn't say it then. But, you know, we can sort out the details here. He did acknowledge the craziness in the markets. What did you think of it?
I thought that it was the president trying to distance himself a little bit from the markets. A correction is invariably going to come. A bear market is invariably going to come. Don't know if it'll come during President Trump's first term, if he indeed does have a second term. But he wants to distance himself from that. I think the biggest numbers out there are the unemployment rate and the GDP. I think it's something that the president should hang his hat on in those instead of the markets.
Yeah, and he was stepping back again, but it might be telegraphing that he's going to go back to talking about the markets, Rich. Would that be a mistake? What do you think?
You know, I think it's a wonderful thing that he's doing that, and I'll tell you why. Because it means that he's much less inclined to do kind of unforced errors on trade and other issues that might impact the market. Good thing that he has people like Gary Cohen, Steve Mnuchin reminding him of that fact. So that Trump is taking ownership of the market makes me really positive. I mean, I couldn't be happier.
Really? Because sometimes there's a risk in that. Even Ronald Reagan, who was happy at the end of his 8 years that markets were still higher than when he came into office, but famously eschewed talking about them prior to that, and it stood him in good service here when the markets tanked, of course, at the '87 crash, rebounding in short order, nevertheless. But he opted not to focus on the markets, more like jobs, that sort of thing, the constructive developments over which presidents do have direct control. What do you think?
Well, in this case, with this president, I think it's a good thing because it steers him toward his better angels and away from this kind of angry at the world, isolate America instincts, which, by the way, I think have subsided considerably since he got rid of Steve Bannon. But the issue is still the 2018 House elections. You know, the Republicans have to win the House to keep this Trump momentum alive.
John Layfield, if Republicans lose the House, I'm just positing that out there, what would the markets do?
I don't think they would do much because I don't think much is going to change. The tax cuts have already been passed. Regulations have already been cut. So I don't think much is going to happen. I think if the Republicans lose the House, projections of unemployment are going to be around 3.8% by the time the election comes around. And if that's true, that's going to be the lowest in 50 years since Lyndon Johnson, which not coincidentally came after the 64 tax cut, which is very similar to the tax cut that just happened now. I think it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to lose this election. But if they did, I don't think the market's going to react that much because everything is pretty much set in motion.
Of course, Rich, it could complicate the Republican agenda, the president's agenda, the next couple of years, because invariably there'll be a lot of hearings on Russia. There'll be a lot of investigations, for all I know, on impeachment, a lot of crazy stuff that could happen when the other party gets control, and you know how that goes. How would you view that and play out those 2 years market-wise?
Well, first of all, I think the Republicans are slam dunk to keep the Senate and maybe even add to their majority. The House, though, I think is a coin flip. They should be doing better than they are, given the economy. But I think if we had a Speaker Pelosi, there would be one hassle after another. At least Trump could keep his movement on regulations and things like that. But further tax cuts would be impossible. We'd all be better off, I think, if we had a Republican House after 2018.
All right. Let me get your sense, guys, very quickly on this monetary statement that came out of the Federal Reserve today. It's easy to get in the weeds and bore people. I save that generally for, well, all my shows. But I did notice that the Fed was saying the economy is moving past full employment, but only moderate wage gains. That seems to, at least the way the markets initially interpreted it, be a sign they're not going to go crazy on raising interest rates. Did I see that correctly, John Layfield, or what do you think?
I think you did. I think the market has been calm significantly since this crazy volatility that happened in the last couple of weeks, and I think the Fed has done a lot to help that. Look, the Fed is telegraphing these rate rises very well, right, and they've done it for some time. We also had inflation coming for some time, but none of this is a surprise, and I think the Fed staying the course in these comments significantly helps calm the markets.
And, Rich, you agree with that? And then do you agree if we see the 10-year finally close over 3%, that seems to be a psychological level that people go nuts about? What do you think?
Well, if growth is at 3% also, then I don't think a 3% 10-year Fed funds rate is going to hurt the markets or the economy in any way. I think we've all built in an expectation of 3 quarter-point rises in 2018.
If there were more than that, Rich?
I think if there were like a half-point hike, that would do more damage than if there were 4 versus 3.
John, you agree with that?
I do agree that I think any surprise, the uncertainty, I think the market has gone up so much that people look at any number right now and any data point, if they see a surprise in there, I think it'll hurt, especially volatility in the short term, yes.
Gentlemen, thank you both very, very much.